Welcome to HSBC Build and Grow, a series that focuses on managing finance for business continuity. As financials takes center stage in business continuity conversations, your story together with HSBC is proud to present this series, featuring some of the finest minds in the ecosystem to help businesses leverage the financial ingenuity, perspective, and insights from these experts to power their own journey, their own continuity. And India, thank you so much for joining today. I was just going through your website and I found something very interesting, an uncommon commonplace. And below that, there was this Netflix image. And somewhere I thought it was very representative of the brand of what you're trying to build because it was new age. It talked, it looked like it's talking to me, and the different facilities that you go and give in, you give in Stanza Living. Tell us, if I have to understand from you, what was in your mind in terms of building of Stanza Living, and what do you see of it as a brand today?
Sure. So, firstly, Shraddha, thank you for inviting me. When in 2017, when I had just flown back to India from London and was starting Stanza Living and was running around the streets of Delhi trying to kind of make this work, and I felt like, what the hell am I doing? I was enjoying a great corporate life, and I remember getting a call from someone at your story at that point of time, and so that was kind of you guys told our story to the world in many ways, so we are grateful for that. Post kind of graduating from IIM Ahmedabad, spent 6 years in London, 3 years with Goldman Sachs, 3 years with Oaktree Capital, both of whom are large owners of student living businesses in the global
Hmm.
context. And I had the opportunity to look at that sector from very close quarters. I was involved in a number of deals. So I saw that space from a Western world context very, very closely. And, inquisitive as I was, and this was a time, 2011 to 2017, when the entire startup ecosystem in India was taking off like crazy. And, I was always finding ways of juxtaposing whatever I was doing in my own life at that point of time to anything in India. And student living was a very, very interesting segment, which kind of caught my attention. Indian student living has historically been very unorganized, fragmented, broken down, mom and pop driven. There are over 8 million students who don't get access to in-campus college housing and look for alternative forms of accommodation. And so we found that as a very, very exciting opportunity. And our thesis was simple and straightforward at that point of time. We want to come back and start a student living brand. We want to focus on kind of amenitizing real estate in many ways. So creating a service layer which sits on top of any real estate business and really kind of focus on building that service layer out. What has happened though over the last kind of 3 years of running now Stanza Living is that we realize that the need is further and beyond students as well. Obviously, students is a very obvious segment because they don't know anything. They're just stepping out of
Yeah.
home for the first time. It's a coming of age moment, and they need and in many ways, the big plus for us is 51% of our consumers come from tier three towns and cities, and sometimes even semi-rural, semi-urban ecosystems. And they probably are the first kind of generation getting educated, moving out of city, moving out of town, and so parents are very, very focused on ensuring there's a convenient, hassle-free, amenitized lifestyle. And so what we basically tapped into was this latent need which already existed. So nothing new in terms of what we created in that context. The need was always there. It's just that we were lucky in terms of having chanced on it at the right time. And so that's been kind of the key, genesis of the idea for Stanza Living. And we historically have been very student heavy, but it's only now, to the point I was making earlier, that we are kind of expanding to other segments, other consumer groups, and asking ourselves questions whether there are more people who are needing this amenitized real estate, amenitized accommodation ecosystem. In India, property ownership or residence ownership, back in the 50s and 60s was the average age for acquisition of a home or for kind of buying a home was 55, 56 years old. And over the last 5, 6 decades, that kind of kept coming down as younger India was becoming more and more ambitious. And then finally, in the 97, 98, it hit 37, 38 years of age. And since the last 2 decades, it's plateaued at 37, 38. which means that the younger generation, the millennials to begin with, and then now the Gen Zs are increasingly prioritizing usership over ownership.
Yeah.
And with that as a trend, in many ways, people want plug and play, amenitized real estate. Not that this was the thesis when we started off. As I said, when we started, it was clearly student living is what was our focus area. But I think we are onto something bigger, and I think that's what keeps us very excited about what the opportunity lies. So that's where the idea basically came from, Shraddha.
Yeah. Yeah, Aditya, I want to understand that, of course, the need for this and what you've created is a huge and large opportunity. And when you were talking about it, I was just remembering my own college days. And, there used to be such a come from a small town and hunt around in Delhi, a place, safe place to stay. And what you're solving is actually a very intrinsic need of the way we live and operate in India. But I just want to understand from you, how are you seeing the market now, right? Like now in this COVID world, we can't deny that this is a new world. Because I've
Yeah.
been having a lot of conversations and people are saying that, while this was true that people want to not have ownership, they're saying that there is a shift now happening where people are saying, oh, safety comes first, and we might now look at a better place because remote working is becoming a norm. But again, you can't generalize because in India it's such a huge market. But
Yeah.
what are some of the signals that you see for your business, for the
Yeah.
space?
Shraddha, it's a very good question. And I'll tell you, in many ways, the last 3 years for us has been an uphill battle in terms of changing people's ways of thinking. When we came in with ideas around area per person, square footage per person, how many room beds to a room, what's the common area, how much dining capacity, all of that. Because we said, that if you use the initial thesis, which we said that it's broken down, fragmented, unorganized, poor quality, we said we need to change the way people live. And over the last 3 years, we've literally been fighting against the tide in terms of getting people to accept some of these norms which we kind of set out to lay out. And I think for us, actually, I think, and COVID is absolutely an aberration in terms of the way the market is behaving. And so, people have gone back home and migrated back to their hometowns, and all of those things have happened. But as we look, and as a founder, you look further ahead and you ask yourself the question that are you creating a long-term structural trend or not? And in that context, I would say what we set out to achieve in 2017, the consumers are now beginning to accept in 2020 because of COVID. I mean, it's a weird way of looking at a silver lining in the cloud. But the reality is, so for example, our lead funnel as it stands today is through the roof versus where it was last year. And the reason for that is anyone and everyone who was living in a, I don't know, a Gupta PG or a Sani PG or a Venkat PG or whatnot, is today then asking themselves the question is that when I go back to, life as usual, am I going to put health and sanitation and safety and trust front and center or not? And I think increasingly the answer to that is yes. I would not have thought that that would be the answer so quickly. The biggest change, by the way, which we are seeing is in how universities and colleges are responding to what's happening at this point of time. We always set out to say we'll create a direct to consumer brand, because when we first met all universities and colleges, there was no willingness for anyone to talk at that point of time about student well-being, student safety, student wellness. They were all like, hey, bahar ecosystem, people will take care of it. We don't have to worry about that. And there's enough demand from an education lens. Increasingly, this, and over the last particular month in specific, the number of universities and colleges which have reached out to us saying, can you manage our in-campus facilities, or can you provide me an off-campus solution? Because even though I'm not opening my university, this month or next month maybe, but I am going to go back to kind of opening my doors at some point of time. And then parents are asking me questions around, what are you doing to ensure that my student lives in, or my ward lives in a ecosystem which is relatively safe and healthy and sanitized. So can we partner with you guys on some of these initiatives? So I would say trends which we knew would take time, but we felt that we kind of had if we kind of kept at it, would kind of, happen, are increasingly becoming relevant and accelerated as a result of that. See, Shraddha, the reality is people have now, because of what's happened, the lockdown and the kind of inconveniences which lockdown have created, people have gone back home. Universities and colleges have shut down, workplaces have shut down. But I don't see this as more of an aberration. It's something which will hang around for the next few months. But once people go back to some sense of normalcy in their lives, we feel there's a disproportionate share which some of the organized players will take from this market, because a large number of the unorganized players, one, either they are kind of running out of business today and hence are going to shut down and fold, or two, the kind of the cost and the implications of those costs when you're running on wafer thin margins to kind of put in place some of these safety measures means that their business models will no longer be viable.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity is actually for us to say that, is this something which we want to kind of capitalize on now? And I think that's what is thinking internally at this point of time.
Yeah. Anindya, what are some of the key metrics, if I may ask, that you monitor in your business to see that, okay, upward ho raha hai, momentum hai, growth ho raha hai? What are some of the things?
Yeah, so I think obviously, the usual metrics which everyone tracks, growth, margins at the unit level, making sure all your properties are, generating money for the business. All of that, is commonplace, and we do that. I think one of the key metrics which we track and which we've been very focused on from day one is return on capital efficiency. Because we do commit capex to refurbish, reposition the real estate. And we don't want to kind of be in a position where we don't recover our capex soon enough. So as a business, we try to recover capex in as short a period of time. And so, your capital efficiency needs to be high. Funnily enough, I remember this, one of our current investors told me at the end of a long kind of, this is like way back in 2017 when we first presented to them. He said that this is the first time that someone has come to kind of for a seed/Series A check and has presented a slide on return on capital. Usually companies at that stage don't talk about return on capital. And for that investor, that was a very important point in terms of looking at investing in us. That continues to be, I think, the number one metric for this business. Obviously customer experience, unit economics, all of that is relevant and important and will continue to be. But I think the one different metric which usually companies at this stage don't focus on, or are beginning to focus on now in a post-COVID world, we've looked at it as an important metric for us always. So return on capital is a very, very important metric to look at.
We were talking about your investors. So you have some very good investors, no? Falcon Edge Capital, Sequoia, Axel, Matrix, Alteria Capital. Just give us a sense, and this is for all the entrepreneurs who would be watching. What was the pitch that got all of them excited?
Yeah, so I think there are 2-3 key things, which is very, very, and I think some of these metrics tend to get distorted in good times and then come back and focus in bad times. And, we've seen that happen. I think there were 3 things which very early on, which were important to us. Is it a large enough market, a large enough opportunity which you're chasing? Are there, you're not chasing a small niche, are you chasing a big enough market? And is the market expandable? So for us, that ticked the box immediately. The other thing was you scale positive unit economics. You don't scale and then get positive unit economics. And I think that's something we have been a very, very strong believer of. So we from day one have focused on our unit economics, our margins, to make sure that we're showing that, okay, this is what we are doing at different price points and we can then scale it. And I think the third thing for me was return on capital. Like if whatever capital we're committing to this business, how soon are we recovering it? And hence, are we creating a business which will require $1 billion of capital or will require a few $100 million or $100 million of capital? And I think that was, for at least our investors, I think I felt was a very, very important 3 points which needed ticking off the box. Obviously they'll tell you other things which they thought about at that point of time. But for me, when I was presenting this to everybody, I thought these are the 3 key important metrics which we should focus on. And I think we were initially bootstrapped for a good kind of 7-8 months before we raised capital. We kind of set our sights on getting these 3 metrics right. And once we were confident about that, only then did we go ahead and kind of try to raise some capital. So I would say that these are the 3 metrics, size of market, unit economics at your scale today, and then scale that up, and then return on capital. These are the 3 metrics I would say very important.
Yeah. There's so many players who have tried to do something similar, but not many have been able to do. I want to understand, and there, if you had to say, if I look back at my last 3 years, then as Stanza Living, there are one or two or three maybe things that we've done right, and that's why we've been able to grow and build a brand. What would those be?
Yeah, so I would say that there are three key things I would say in my head, and I'm sounding like a consultant or not because I mean, uh, I think the first thing is a razor sharp focus on unit economics. And when I say razor sharp focus on unit economics, it's modeling and understanding every single cost item and spending time on each one of them. We when we made our first couple of hires into the company, and some of them were from very established startups and came into this, came into our ecosystem. And when they looked at our models, we had modeled things like newspapers which are being delivered to the buildings and so on and so forth, which was costing 50 paise rupee per person per month, but we had modeled that in. And it was important to know everything which goes into kind of building that kind of property and the EBITDA level numbers. One of our competitors who sadly folded shop, I remember they'd approached us for an acquisition, and I was talking to one of their guys, and he said this to me that it was a profound statement, stayed in my head for a long period of time. He said, we had modeled this to be unit economics profitable at 60% occupancy. I'm today operating at 100% occupancy and I'm still not making money. I don't know why. And for me, it comes down to that fact where if you're very razor sharp, obsessed with every single number, every single detail, then that obviously helps you and kind of puts you in good stead. And it's a cultural thing. It becomes a part of the company's culture over time in terms of obsession with every single number, no matter how large or small it is. Yeah.
So Anitya, you're saying that before you started, you had that focus कि जो भी करेंगे unit economics positive.
And again, Shraddha, again, it comes back from, so my co-founder Sandeep is from BCG. I am from Goldman Oak Tree. It's just something which we have learned in our lives, past lives, where, thoroughness of every information piece is very, very important. So I don't think it's something which innately comes to us. It's just we've been tutored the right way over time, and I think that helps us. So, that was a very, very important kind of takeaway from us. The second thing is, I think we very early on realized or asked ourselves this question as to what is the risk, quantify risk and understand every element of risk, and then take a call whether you're okay to take that risk or not. And I say this a lot to people internally in the company: risk and uncertainty. Uncertainty is unmeasured risk, and risk is something which you're measured. Don't kind of live in uncertain times. Understand risk and take risk. But at least quantify it, every piece, every dollar, and be able to kind of put that into a perspective, and then take the trade-off. And sometimes you get the trade-off right, and sometimes you get it wrong. But the worst thing is you go into some market or go into some thesis and you don't even know what you're kind of punting on. That kind of puts you into a very, very weak spot. So I would say these have been two very important parts. The third part, I think, which we learned very, very early on was, and I think this was not there with us when we started the business, but I think we've learned along as we've gone along. When you're scaling a traditional offline business and trying to scale it at almost venture capital pace, you're growing 4, 5, 6x every year, you cannot do it without people. You cannot do it without people putting in inordinate amounts of effort and hard work. So, although, people have different ways of thinking about culture, reward people the right way, reward people for all the hard work which they put in, whether it's, monetarily or otherwise. But as long as you are able to acknowledge the importance which people have in the ecosystem, I think you'll always create a great business. And I think for us particularly, we are very clear, this is not a pure play tech product where, you build something like an Instagram or a WhatsApp and virality kind of spreads through you. Every piece of the puzzle, every day, every new property you onboard has to kind of go through a lot of kind of love, care, and attention. And the only way you'll be able to drive throughput of pace or productivity is if people are willing to stretch themselves. And when you want people to stretch themselves, they need to believe in the mission, in what you are out to do. So spend time inordinately with the people in the company, in the ecosystem. And I think these are the three kind of, for me, big differentiators for Stanza Living today versus everybody else. I think today, Stanza Living, the one thing which I'm very, very proud of is our leadership team. Our leadership team is best in class. There are people who've got 25, 30 years of experience in scaling consumer businesses. And we acknowledge, both Sandeep and I, we have always acknowledged that we are not the smartest guys in the room. We very often don't know anything about launching a property in Lucknow, for example, where, you have to think about several kind of non-modelable variables, and but people have done that, and they've built that. So, rely on their experience and build it out. So I would say these are the three things: razor sharp focus on numbers, people as a very important focus, and understanding risk. I would say these are the three very, very important, difficult to again quantify, but important pieces of how we thought about our business.
Yeah, this to me is a master class in
Thanks.
building business, and what's coming across is that thinking unit economics, and I think and then what I also hear from you is that you're not thinking about it now. In the recent past, you started it from day one, day
Yeah,
zero.
and it's
Uh,
important. It's important, Shraddha, because you're seeing what's happening to companies which have not focused more.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes I also feel it also brings me to this question of it's so important to have a very a steady, hard, and proper work experience, right? Like it's before starting up.
It's a, I don't know, I'm torn on this one.
Yeah.
So I struggle with this. I feel, one of my ex bosses once told this to me, that if all my if and this was in my private equity days, that if in my portfolio of investments, if every investment is ahead of plan, what should I think? And I said, you should be very happy with yourself. And he said, wrong, I'm very disappointed with myself. And I said, why? Because he said that means there are opportunities out there which were underwrote to be, not up to our business plan, but which would have delivered probably. And so we missed on those opportunities. And I feel that's true with about, having work experience and not. Sometimes we don't have work experience, the sky's the limit. You believe you can do everything and anything. With us, every time, when people come up to us with crazy ideas, we are like, show me the business rationale. And, sometimes people feel like that's stifling. So I
That's
don't
true.
know. I mean, some of the young guys have built fantastic businesses, which will be, there for decades, and I can't take that away. But yes, for me at least, having that experience helps, and helped. I don't know
Yeah.
if it would have been different or not had I started at 21, 22. By the way, in my family, no one has ever come even remotely close to starting a business. So, everyone in my family has been in the service background or in the education background. So this is new in many ways territory for me genetically also. So in that context, I just feel that the experience at least anchors me to something which I know and I'm comfortable with.
No, but very aptly said. There's no right answer, but yeah, experience helps. Showing in Stanza Living, what are some of the adjacencies, areas you're looking to expand into?
Yeah. So look, I mean, it's early days for us. We have been very, very focused on student living. We've just recently announced a foray into the early stage working professional segment, which was about to launch in March. Luckily for us, we didn't launch it, so we've kind of avoided a lot of potential losses on that front. So that's been good for us. But that's a segment which, even though will take time to recover, which I think will come back. So the focusing on that consumer segment will be a priority area for us in the future. Honestly, managed real estate of various forms is something which is exciting to us, and we want to do it. But what is also, and that's kind of adjacencies in terms of horizontals, right? In terms of more consumer segment, same product which you could launch. One of the things which we feel very excited about is that this consumer set, spends 15, 16 hours a day in our building, multiple touch points with us. They're consuming 4 meals a day of food. They are using our internet services. They are using, laundry, transport, last mile mobility options where we've got partnerships with people. One, very, very interesting anecdote, which I will tell you, and I'm sure this gave me a business idea once. One of our kind of, local team members once came to us and said that, can you, instead of giving me my salary at the end of every month, can you break it into two parts and give me part of it, every 15 days, just pay me every 15 days. And I asked, why do you need that? And this is a kind of, very junior, young, captain of one of our buildings. And his view was कि sir ऐसा होता है कि जब when people are when the students run out of money and they get their monies in the first of every month, but the 20th they've run out of money, they borrow from me. So I have to give them 5, 6, 7, 8,000 rupees. So I run out of money. And for me, in many ways, some could have seen this as a HR problem. We at Stanza saw this as a business opportunity because there's something about the consumer behavior which we have learned in terms of his need for short-term credit. So we really want to think about how do we tap into this consumer even more, given the amount of time which he spends with us or she spends with us in our buildings, and the ability to influence some of their behaviors or kind of give them or extract more share of the wallet as a business person sounds exciting. I'm not necessarily sure we have solved those problems as yet. And so I think it's early days for us to talk about those adjacencies. But that's definitely something we have an eye on. We are spending time internally studying a lot about. I don't think there's any immediate plan to launch any of these, but some things which we definitely have in mind. Can we not only just explore the adjacencies from a horizontal lens, but also from a vertical lens?
Yeah. At some point, do you think of creating like a community platform for, because this is a young audience that you have?
Yeah, so I think I'm a little torn on that one, Shraddha, to be honest. The community angle has been done to death in the Western world, particularly. And we always kind of approach this. And again, because of having seen that in my life, past life, in the Western world, what we do, parallels of that industry is good to have. It's something which it's a want, it's not a need. In India, we're really solving for an affordability problem. We are saying that, when you migrate from one city to another, the cost of putting together the accommodation and all the services on top of that is not just painful in terms of doing what you have to do and putting this all together, but we are providing you hassle-free convenience at the lowest possible cost. So affordability is a very, very important mantra of what we do. So today our priority area is to solve for affordability at every price point, at every kind of demand segment, across the market. And so we're really solving for needs. And community is a want in my head, which will come once we have solved for the need. So I think I'm not obsessed with solving for community needs at this point of time. I'm definitely obsessed with solving for the fundamental basic, housing and housing associated banalities, solving for that day one, and solving it at the lowest possible cost and lowest possible price to the end consumer. Because I think once we do that, we clearly will then have the opportunity to layer on some of these kind of slightly more Western concepts, if I might say so, like community, etc. I'm not belittling it. I think it's important and it will be important. I just think that as a country, we are not there as yet where we start talking about community as much as I know some of the Western world peers of mine are talking about at this point.
You said a very interesting thing, that things that have worked and things that you focused on. One of the things was, how do you keep your leadership team? How do you keep your team energized, motivated, and to the mission, right? Tell me, what is it that you tell internally about the mission of Stanza Living? What is it that gets everyone excited?
Yeah, I think, I've always said this to people that my pipe dream at this point of time is really making accommodation and real estate plug and play, in every sense of the word. So, I really want consumers to be able to access space and that service layer on top of that in the most flexible manner possible. And that suddenly opens up opportunities of multiple scales for us. So any kind of real estate layer on which you can build a service layer will become available for us to kind of focus on. And I think that's been a very, very clear focus area in terms of how we explain the business to everyone internally. I think one key point for us is, I think we very early on said, we are not, as I said earlier, we are not the smartest guys in the room. We know what we are doing as a collective, but every single piece of the puzzle, we don't know it better than the guys who are leading those functions. So giving full independence to teams to kind of create their own strategies and create their own ways of kind of growing out their respective functions is very, very important. The one other thing which I would say is that, and I feel that we are a very ambitious group of people, both Sandeep and I, the desire to create an outsized outcome, and you'll see this with a lot of young successful entrepreneurs, I think, is very, very high. I think we're not there in terms of being called young successful as yet, but in terms of desire to create that outsized outcome is very, very high. And so very often we stretch people to ask themselves this question: if you can do 3,000 beds in this market, why not 5? Why not 6? Why not 7? What's kind of stopping you to going there? So I think for us, it's really about telling people that, look, real estate is a massive opportunity in the context of of the country, and we are seeing very significant transitory events happening in various forms of real estate at this point of time, and COVID is accelerating some of these trends.
Yeah.
It is very important for us to bring together the entire service layer, the real estate and technology together to then say, can we create a business model which is easily transferable across segments? And I think that's something which then suddenly increases the opportunity significantly. And then let people kind of drive their own functions, their own kind of mandates. We don't claim to know everything, and you know we don't kind of get into everything as well, because we are not the best guys to run everything ourselves. That's a reality. So for us, it's about letting people do what they have to do, stretch them in terms of their vision, their imagination, but at the same time, tell them where we want to get to. I remember this. There was one senior person who we were looking to hire at some point of time in our real estate team, and I really wanted that guy to come in, and he said, "Sir, at how many beds do you think I will be allowed to retire?" That was his question. And I said, 30, 40,000 beds, and you should retire. And today, every day he gives me this taunt, कि sir, 30, 40,000 beds to हो गए. Baby मेरे नहीं आएंगे. I said, no, because our goals have changed. Tough luck, get on with it. Right? So I think those are the kind of key points from our perspective, Shraddha.
Yeah. As an entrepreneur, if you have to look back at the last 3 years, uh, what are some of the things you think you as an entrepreneur have done right?
I think the two, three key things there for me is we, coming from the backgrounds which both Sandeep and I came from, we tend to be very anal about details. We tend to be very kind of focused on every single number, every single dollar, every single, in a way, we are control freaks, right? Historically. To let go is tough. But I think when you let go, magic can happen. And I think for me, that's been the single most important transition I've had to do as a person, because I'm, my when I used to be at private equity, my associates used to love me because they used to be like, Anindya khud hi model bana dega, so no tension, like I don't have to worry about it, right? And to then come here and say that I'm letting people take P&L decisions by themselves and trusting them with it has been a very, very important change for us. But I think there's magic in some of that. India is, it's mind blowing the amount of talent we have in this country, and the amount of willingness to hack their way through kind of success is so strong in some of the younger leaders of the country today, that really at sometimes I feel that that's the best thing I've done, to let people kind of run their own shows in many ways internally in the company. So I think letting things go and letting people own their respective mandates with minimum intervention, because I know if I say zero intervention, the team will kill me, but with minimum has been an important what we achieved.
And if there you are in money matter, tell me, what does money mean to you?
Yeah, so as I said, one of the things which I spoke about and we've used a lot of times, this word is capital efficiency. At the end of the day, money has to make money. And whatever dollars you put into any business or into your own savings or whatnot, if money doesn't make money for you, you're not creating value. That's I'm being very, very materialistic about the way I'm approaching it. But the reality is, I strongly believe in that wherever you're, whether it's as a personal investment, whether it's a professional investor making an investment, whether it's you committing capital to a business line, everything, you have to be able to honestly stand up and say that, will this make more money than any other alternative form of allocation of capital. So
Yeah.
for me, money has to make money, and that's a very, very important question we ask ourselves. Every time we ask ourselves, is this the best use of this capital, what we are doing at this point in time? And the answer to that is no, or the answer to that is I'm not sure, don't do it. That's one thing where I say people that be confident about what you're doing, because it has to be the best use of the capital at that point of time. So I think for me that's important. The power of compounding is a very, very important power, and money has to make more money. That's my simple kind of take on this.
What has been your learning as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as the co-founder of Stanza Living during this COVID time? Has there been any personal learning, business learning?
Yeah, I think there are two things. I think one from a business lens, which I would say is that very often, when you're chasing a particular target, you lose sight of some other things which happen in the business. For example, one of the things which we did as a company is look at our non-people corporate costs and say, is there some things which are good to have, or are they must-haves? and whatever is good to have, can we do away with it? And this is not something which should require a pandemic to focus on. But I think what the pandemic has done is definitely made us, and I think it's across the board, across the community, every founder I speak to, I think we are just becoming better quality entrepreneurs because, to your point earlier about what every dollar means, it's just like how, at home, when you lose even 15 rupees as a kid, you lost the 15 rupees as a kid, your dad used to give you one tight slap across your face, right? That importance of every 15 rupees or 10 rupees or 5 rupees, that discipline cannot be lost when you're in a corporate or when you're in a startup. And I think we ourselves have kind of literally kind of shifted focus back to saying, look at every single dollar, look at every single rupee, and ask yourself this question: that can I do without it? Was it wasteful? Was it necessary? And yes, can I cut it down now? And can I have some lessons learned from this for the future? So I think across the board, in many ways, we are creating a very solid, lean, mean machines from multiple startups are doing that. And that's, I think, very good for the ecosystem. One, I think at a personal level, very often you start thinking about every possibility and every, and how it will play itself out. And you start thinking about what you can do and what you cannot do. I think the learning that certain things are beyond your control and you can let them be and just focus on what's in your control and drive whatever you can do on those parts is important. So, for example, when COVID happened, our first 3 months, we had very, very limited impact because we're in the student living business. So, consumers paid us in advance. So we had a lot of money collected. So we had nothing to worry about. We said, we don't know when this will end. So let's not ask ourselves this question as to when this will end. But let's ask ourselves this question that given all we have, the 650 plus, team which we have at Stanza Living, what can we do? And what can we improve? What are we kind of, deprioritizing as a company because we are growing at a particular pace which we can focus on? So, everything from an operating model to SOPs to learning and development to technology, we have just doubled our focus on that because these are things under our control. There is no point thinking about when will the universities and colleges come back because that's not in your control. But yes, look for ways in which you can kind of use what you have under your control to create more value, not necessarily for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, but definitely for the long term.
Yeah.
Very often, people in my team and sometimes even my investors tell me, "Ki tu bahut zyada long term sochta hai." But I feel that that's the answer at times.
Yeah.
Because by the way, I feel this is not the last of the pandemics we have seen. This is not the first, second, except where we'll see a lot more of these disruption to our life. And, business models have to be robust and be able to kind of deal with that. So asking ourselves questions around those are very, very important. And I think focus on what you can control and drive that. That's been a key area of focus for us, at least. And learning for us, earlier we used to think about everything possible, which is not even under control, and try to figure out ways of making things that, fall into your control. But I think, you should just, a little bit of Zen mode on that front does not hurt you.
Wow. Amazing. For money, you have materialistic view. For building business, you have Zen mode.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. But what I'm taking is that to build a business, you have to think long term. And you are at Stanza Living thinking long term while having a laser focus on what all can get better.
Yeah, I mean, just be prepared. I think the world will look very different from when we shut down in March in a post-COVID world. And we are preparing for that. We are not asking ourselves कि ये 6 महीने चलेगा कि 9 महीने चलेगा कि 8 महीने चलेगा. Luckily, we are well capitalized, so we don't have to worry about that. We are asking ourselves simply, what are you ready when the race starts again? And will you win that battle then? And I think that's what our focus area is.
Wow, wonderful talking to you. It was a very authentic and free-flowing, and I thought that you've shared very openly. Thank you. Very good conversation.
Thank you.